name is Kim and I work in drone and counter-drone operations in Ukraine. I've always felt a connection to Ukraine, but in addition to that, I thought some of my more technical skills could be of use. I was first a reporter, freelance, and then I worked as a medic for a year. Now I've transitioned over to doing drone work. One of my friends contacted me and asked me if I wanted to be a reporter in Ukraine. At that time, I just finished with my master's program, so I headed on over to try and see what I could learn about the war. I was working as a medic both on Casevac and Medevac. I got quite a bit of training and good experience working in Ukraine in combat support roles during that time.
Before you ended up in a drone unit, how much did you know about drone warfare?
I knew quite a bit from my time in my master's program, but at the same time, the state of drone warfare here is so fluid that I don't think I really knew a lot about how they were being used in the more fine details. The general idea of how they were used in terms of tactics, but not the specific problems faced by units day to day. I flew Mavic once or twice, and I used to be into remote control airplanes, but those don't really fly like the drones we use out here. Honestly, I would say just flying helicopters in video games helped me more than any real drone experience that I had before. Finding a unit was a little difficult, but I'm glad that I ended up where I am today. The first training I had was a 7-week course on Mavics that basically discussed the best TTPs to use them on a battlefield. After that, I got training on Lucky Strike bomber drones, which are a bit more advanced, but also a bit more, crude. That involved a lot of flying and bombing simulated targets. And then I finally got training on heavy bomber drones, which was a lot of how to use the custom software and navigation tools that were available with the, I guess you could say, advanced firmware on those drones.
In the training, how was the ratio between theoretical knowledge, flying, and TTPs?
I would say theoretical knowledge was almost zero. They did tell us how to calculate the approximate distance at which you should drop, and they did test us on that during the final exam. But by and large, most of the training was practical dropping. Like we'd go out, we'd drop every day for hours. Actually, my drone training before the unit was only about a week, but then in the unit, I got months of training. I mentioned the flying training, but there was also months of on-the-job technical training. I would say there's quite a bit of retraining. A lot of new technology for sending and receiving signals to the drones evolves. Obviously, I can't talk about all of it because it's quite sensitive, but there often is a need for pilots to come in and at least receive, a day or two course on how to use these new types of receivers and transmitters.
If someone wants to become a drone operator or work with building and modifying drones, what's the most important personal quality they can have?
I would say having a good attention to detail and being pretty studious is the most important qualities because the Ukrainians love to send out drones with these long technical manuals, and understanding the little details of those can be the difference between losing a drone and keeping it. After you train, I think it's being pretty detail-oriented and keeping records, like keeping records of your flight paths, what's effective, what's not, as well as, hand-eye coordination obviously can't be ignored. It's also pretty important. Reflexes as well, especially if you're doing quick maneuvers, you need to be able to make the correct control inputs at the correct time. If you have some experience of just basic flight dynamics of, I guess you could say like a rotary wing vehicle, that also helps. My specific unit does almost everything from ground drones, Mavic repair, FPVs, to other tasks. We get new types of drones in all of the time, so we need to evaluate them, test them, see how they perform before we send them out to units. I would say very few drones are actually custom built nowadays. Most drones are created from commercially sourced parts by Ukrainian factories, though we are seeing a shift to Ukrainian-made circuit boards and components. I think there's two factors. The first is just it's more affordable to conduct assembly of drones in Ukraine, and it's more responsive to the local needs. The second is sanctions by China on drone parts headed directly to Ukraine. Purpose-built drones are designed to carry payload, more than off-the-shelf drones. So when you load them down, you see the difference in performance.
The ones that are built in Ukraine, are they from state actors or volunteer organizations?
You see both. I would say both state actors, commercial entities that are sponsored by state actors to produce, as well as volunteers. I would say volunteers actually make some of the best drones because they spend more money, they spend more time testing out the components, so you get some stuff that's really nice to fly.
In our previous interview with a medic working on the front line, we were told that Russia uses almost exclusively state-built drones with very specific technical specifications, and that Ukraine uses drones from, like you said, a variety of sources. How does that play into the drone warfare?
I think, especially for units on the front, if they're facing a mediocre drone team on the Russian side, it's fairly easy to defeat their drones because there's not much variation in the drones that they're sent over. I've seen a couple of Russian drones myself. I wasn't particularly impressed by the components they use. They're all very cheap. They also tend to use aluminum frames, I guess because they have aluminum stamping machines that can make them en masse. Whereas we use carbon fiber frames because they're stiff and lighter, so we can carry heavier payloads. Generally, at this level, the drone comes pre-assembled. We just handle the attachment of initiation mechanisms, and we do final evaluation before they're sent out. This can be pretty complex. We might have to assemble the entire initiation mechanism ourselves and solder to the circuit board and do the programming, or it can be quite easy. Sometimes we just do flight testing, and the initiation mechanism is attached to the munition itself, as opposed to interacting with the drone's chips. What I work with mostly is attack drones. Recon drones are almost 100% commercial, mostly Mavics from Digi, as well as Matrices, mostly due to their very high quality camera units. But my unit works with both, but I work mostly with attack. I would say recon drones, they're a lot more refined product. They use custom radio protocols that aren't as easy to jam. They're lighter, they fold up. They're meant to be reusable, whereas attack drones, they're meant to strike a balance between performance and cost. That's ideal for a one-way attack mission. For cameras on both sides, ideally you want better quality just to be able to better see your target. We're seeing a lot more thermal cameras being used by both the Russians and Ukrainians on attack drones to allow missions to be flown at night. And we're also seeing night vision cameras being used on attack drones. The use of thermal cameras on attack drones has been increasing.
In the beginning of the war and middle of the war, about a year ago, there was a lot of social media content released from commercial off-the-shelf drones using drop attack methods with grenades, mortar grenades, and different types of munitions. While recently we've been seeing more and more FPV attack videos. Is that a general trend?
I would say bombers still are used quite a bit, both from reports from the infantry and from what we work with out here. Bombers are still useful, though they're mostly purpose-built nowadays and not attached to commercial drones. Different drones for different missions. We mostly handle FPV kamikaze drones, though we've also worked with bombers, and some drones are produced that can perform both the FPV and the bomber role. So a bomber will usually have a camera that can rotate down 90 degrees to see the target. They also tend to be heavier, so they can support more payload. They'll have more servo outputs to enable the dropper mechanisms to be wired directly to the flight controller without the weird hacky solutions that you see on commercial drones. And they also tend to have more advanced navigation systems on board to enable them to stabilize themselves when they're doing drop missions. You do have simpler bombers like dive bombers that dive down and use the natural accuracy of that flight profile to hit the target. But in general, bombers are a bit more expensive, a bit heavier, and have more functionality than a simple attack drone. I would say FPVs are way more accurate when hitting moving targets because it's a guided missile. You can constantly correct it on the way to the target, whereas bombers are better for harassment, just constantly keeping Russians up at night in harassment attacks, and for hitting positions because you can carry more payload and drop multiple times to make sure a position is destroyed.
How big of a problem is electronic warfare?
It can be pretty big. It depends on the front, the time of day, and the targets, but electronic warfare can incur a lot of losses on drones before the target is destroyed. You tend to see better resourced Russian units have a very heavy EW presence, whereas the more sparse areas of the front, the drones tend to fly freely. From footage that I've seen, the tank units tend to be pretty well resourced. You see the new turtle tanks with heavy EW complexes strapped on top. That seems to be a trend because they can protect an entire column with such a tank.
Do you yourselves use a lot of electronic warfare against Russian drones?
We do, but details there are sensitive. Drone teams are pretty heavily targeted by both sides. Generally, if you're not subtle about how you set up your position, you can expect a lot of artillery fire. But once the drones are flying, you can expect it anyways. The front is generally pretty transparent due to recon drones by both sides, so the vehicle that's suspected to a drone team infiltrates to their position, and then the position is targeted.
So they need to be careful when they go and deploy, even though they're far behind the front line.
Yep, with long-range recon drones, which are a problem, the entire front line is almost transparent.
How do you think drone warfare has evolved?
At the start of the war, there are almost no drones involved. Like, there's some Mavics flying around, but as time has gone on, we've seen more purpose-built drones, more purpose-built anti-drone complexes. And I think we're going to see an evolution in terminal targeting with like actual seekers involved, as well as evolution of the electronic warfare game with more advanced jammers, as well as the other elements of electronic warfare coming into play. The evolution of terminal seekers with the ability to just home in at the final stages where jamming tends to be most intense is going to be the most influential development in the next few months. But at the same time, I think in the longer term, we're going to see more and more autonomous munitions.
So you're talking about the stage where the drone operator cannot directly control the drone himself?
Yes, that's correct. I think drones are going to trend to become more fire and forget. I'm not sure that we're going to reach levels where there's entire swarms of autonomous killer drones out there, simply due to the cost. We tend to keep costs down, and adding such processing power to each individual drone would probably be pretty expensive. But especially for high-value targets with a lot of electronic warfare, like these turtle tanks, such AI drones are going to make them obsolete. I hesitate to use the word AI because it's the same seeker tech that's been used in missiles since the Cold War. I don't have any experience with autonomous drones personally, but what generally happens, as I understand from an attack profile for them, is they're sent up, the target is spotted and then locked on via a certain mechanism by the operator, and then the drone guides itself to the target.
How do you think drones have changed warfare in general?
From what I've heard from other people in the infantry, drones dictate how they fight. They can't move at certain times. Open fields are even more deadly than they were before. And one has to consider, EW considerations when they go out and fight, how long the battery might last, what their resupply plan is. Everything right now is actually fairly power-centric. Your drones require power, EW requires power. You need power to stay in position, and that's changing the timetables of how units fight.
Do you feel that the Western military complex is prepared for the type of drone warfare being conducted here?
I think yes and no. I think yes in that they're delivering specific solutions. I've heard of some very advanced solutions being used by units out in the field, but no more as how they plan to defeat drones. I remember there was a news article about a British company that made a quadcopter defeat system that used microwaves that worked out to 1.25 kilometers or something like that. But at 1.25 kilometers, the system would be spotted and destroyed by a longer range drone.
What should commanding officers in Western armies, with the resources currently at their disposal, try to do to minimize the danger of drones?
I would say that the dissemination of TTPs to build safe bunkers to protect against drones is important. The importance of utilizing proper overhead cover, as well as coordination with EW units, would be the most critical aspects of how to defeat drones.
Do you feel that these are skills we already have in the Western forces?
I don't think so. I've read a couple of stories of how units have tried to incorporate drones into their training, but from what I've heard, the op for using drones is using them quite amateurishly, like using a Mavic to recon 60 meters over position. I think that happened here, the Mavic would be shot down. in Ukraine, the use of drones is very multi-layered. Like you have Mavics up, you have FPVs up, you have almost all of these long-range drones up at the same time. So the offer, I think, needs to be better resourced to provide all of these drones, put them up at the same time, and have a forced fight against that, as opposed to just putting up a couple, spotting some guys and then running away. Like 24/7 drone coverage is what's happening right now. Not sure if it will necessarily happen in a war with NATO proper due to NATO's increased investment in their own short-range air defense, but it's definitely a possibility.
Individual soldiers, what can they do to prepare and how can they train?
I would say get used to building fighting positions with overhead cover. Invest in some kind of personal thermal camouflage. It can be quite bulky, but I know some teams use it. And in general, just practice taking cover and hiding from overhead threats. You can do this with, if you have a drone available for training, just hide on the ground. Try and hide in a way that you can't be visible from the drone in the sky.
What additional resources would be required to be better prepared against these threats, in addition to a well-equipped and trained officer?
I think good passive detection capabilities for drones is paramount. Strong EW and also hard kill measures for drones. I think an area of interest is equipping more and more armored vehicles with lightweight air-burst autocannons to be able to just smack down any light drones that pop up. This capability exists right now, but it's pretty widely distributed. It needs to be distributed in like every vehicle in a platoon.
Can you elaborate a bit more for viewers who are not technically minded what you mean by passive detection, EV, and hard kill systems?
So passive detection in this case would be a way to detect where a drone is without using an active sensor like a radar that outputs signals of its own. As for electronic warfare, in this aspect, it's just strong jammers that can passively defeat drones before they get within range, and hard kill is the act of destroying the drone itself. So we need better systems of, putting a projectile out there that destroys the drone. I would say, especially as drones get more and more autonomous, we need better hard kill systems for drones. Though this also can come in the form of, I guess you could say, directed energy weapons, either like strong lasers or microwaves. Both of those have pretty good potential for defeating large numbers of drones at low cost.
What kind of help does Ukraine need in the field of drones from the rest of the world to win the drone war?
I think specialized components to help build drones, like more jam-resistant receivers, specialized recon drones that operate very similar to Mavics, that would be a great development. But at the same time, I think Mavics continue to be the most popular because both sides use them effectively, so they know they aren't losing any sensitive technology if a Mavic is shot down, and Mavics are shot down in the hundreds daily. But if a more jam-resistant, like Mavic type drone could come around and be provided en masse to Ukraine, I think it would be a major benefit, possibly one with like designator capabilities for precision guided munitions as well. But at the same time, like Ukraine needs help of any type, and almost anything is appreciated.